and AI as well. So a lot of software developers I'm speaking to at the moment, 90% of them, if not more, are using AI.
Mhm.
And they're not listing it on their CV, but actually clients want to see that sometimes.
Morning, Mary. I saw you on another podcast a few months ago now, and you were talking about CVs and some of the mistakes people make. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that people are making on their CVs when they're looking for jobs right now?
So there's a lot of kind of false information going around at the moment. I don't know what it is really, because I've done recruitment now for like nearly 9 years, and I've not really come across this in the prior years, but this past year and a half been mega. So it's a one-page CV. So I talk about this on everything I'm on because it's huge, and the amount of time that people are telling me they're spending trying to get their information on one page, and I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Who's telling you to do this? And I think actually a lot of it, funnily enough, comes from ChatGPT as well, because that seems to recommend you doing that as well, which is crazy. But yeah, I need to figure out a way of training ChatGPT to stop doing that. But yeah, so they spend a lot of time putting their information down as much as possible, whereas they should be spending the time actually getting more information on their CV. And it ends up costing them a lot of time down the line because I'm like, I can't send this CV over; it's going to get rejected. So the other kind of mistakes as well at the moment, and I think it kind of ties into the fact that people are being told to reduce their CV right down, is missing the skills section. So specifically for technical people, so developers, if they're putting their tech stack on there, it is kind of in the like job description sometimes, but having that list there because it's so important because it ties into like keyword searches, stuff like that. So a lot of people don't understand from a developer perspective. We don't just go, oh, front end developer, software developer. We search on skills because people can be called all sorts. So having those skills in there, if you don't have that, you're just not going to come up on searches. Um, and I guess the only other major thing really is kind of a lot of people list their CV as a bit of a job description. So I do this, I do that, whereas it should be more about achievements. So what have you achieved in that job? Like, people like a lot of like return on investment kind of percentages, like monetary kind of value, or even like, awards and stuff like that. Like it just makes you stand out in comparison to other software developers because obviously the market's tight and very competitive. So, you've got that to kind of contend with, really.
Okay, cool. So, spoilers, you're learning one of my next questions about what the market's like.
Wow.
Okay, cool. So, the market's difficult, which is why we're talking, because I think you've got some useful advice for people. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things there that you mentioned. So, you said recent years, this is kind of new advice.
Mm,
As you said that, I was thinking, and I've been in this industry for nearly 30 years, I was thinking that doesn't surprise me actually, because I used to think I wrote a brilliant CV because there was a time when I put my CV out and I could put it on a job board or somewhere, give it to somebody, and my phone would ring off the hook.
mm,
I literally just couldn't answer the calls fast enough, even if I was looking for a job. And at that point, you think, oh, I've got the perfect CV. Put it into the world, and minutes later, my phone starts ringing mad. And at times, that my CV has been up to, I think, 8 pages, and at other points down to 2 pages, and it didn't make any difference. I think what many of us have missed is that there was a time in tech, and it's probably changed in different countries and there's been several times of it, where simply by being available and having 1 or 2 skills that are highly in demand, people would give you a call no matter how good or bad your CV was. It simply didn't matter. If they searched for C++ developer and you turn up as C++ developer, they'd be ringing you, and it simply didn't matter. So I think a lot of us maybe had this naive, false belief that we were great at writing CVs because we got the results, and it was simply that the demand was so high. I think that certainly plagued me in the early years.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Because when I started in recruitment, it was crazy. What I'd have to do in the morning, so whenever I had a software developer position in the morning, I'd have to get in earlier than anybody, check the job board, see who's uploaded their CV from the night before, and ring them straight away. And you're talking like some days I'd have to get in at like 7:30, or I'd stay late. And I'd be ringing people while they were having their tea and stuff like that, and they were like trying to get rid of me. And I'm like, no, no, I won't take, I'll just be 5 minutes. Whereas it's not like that anymore. I can pre-book calls in with candidates for, later in the week, and I'm not like anxious they're going to be ripped off the market. It's just crazy how much it's changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that one-page advice also comes from the fact that social media has made it so much easier to see different markets. So we get a lot of our view of hiring kind of corrupted by Silicon Valley. And I'm sure that a lot of engineers, if they've been 5 years at Google, then 2 years at Meta, they can fit that on one-page CV, and they're going to get a call because it says Google Meta on their CV. Doesn't really matter what the rest of it says. They've got those. Or, if they're in AI, they've got Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever. They're going to get the call because of the names on their CV, the brands that they've worked for. So again, they could put out a one-page CV or a 6-page CV and it wouldn't make any difference. I think that's also twisting the market. And, well, the best word in the world, some of the companies I've worked for, but, John's design shop or whatever, it's not going to have the same cachet, and nobody's going to come knocking on my door for, hey, you've worked there, come and interview.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't actually agree as such, because and previously totally agree, by the way. Like, a couple of years ago that was absolutely the case. The big brands and stuff. But at the moment, actually, it doesn't really matter. It's about because you could have worked at Meta, but people don't really care. Sometimes actually some of my clients don't like that they've worked for companies like Meta. Because in Meta, you're just a number, and this is not everybody, by the way. I don't want to kind of tar everyone with the same brush, but you can be seen as just a number because they're big companies. Whereas I'm hiring for smaller businesses, so I'm sure it is like that in like London and places that are looking for recruitment agencies that are looking for bigger brands. That's probably the case, but for me personally, because they're smaller businesses, they're medium-sized businesses. My top client's only about 500 staff. They don't want somebody from Meta or Google because they've worked in bigger teams, and a lot of the time, again, not always, but a lot of the time they're kind of not the same kind of caliber of talent they need. Fantastic, candidates, but they just need something a little bit different in these clients. So yeah, them having just Meta, Google, that kind of thing on their CV, like, it doesn't mean much anymore, actually. But yeah, previously you are right though, that would have made a big difference.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to forget, particularly that maybe those of us that followed them since Google was a company of like 5 people, that
Yeah,
they're not startups anymore. They are massive enterprises. They are now what would have been at the beginning of my career the equivalent of GE. These big corporates that are slow, full of corporate drones. The kind of companies that when we worked at startups 20, 30 years ago, we would mock as being the big old-fashioned companies that careers went to die. So interesting that other people are starting to have that perspective.
yeah.
Cool. So the other mistake you mentioned there was like missing tech skills.
Hmm.
This is again one where I see a lot of advice on both sides. So some saying list all your tech skills and list everything so you get through the filters, and some saying keep it down to a minimum, don't put too much. And again, I've seen this advice so many times over the years, and sometimes I've sent my CV through a recruiter and they've come out and said, can you add this, this, and this? I know we've talked about it, you've done it, but it's not on your CV, so the client's going to want to see it. And at other times, people say, well, if you've done Python, just list Python. If you've done Java, just list Java. What's the balance, do you see? Or do you think it's different for each client?
So it's tricky because if you put everything on, like you could have done, like for example, a few years ago you could have done like C++, but now you're like a C#.NET developer. So if you put that on there and then some people are hiring for a C++ developer, you'll come up and obviously you wouldn't be interested in that. So you have got to stay relevant, I would say. So I would say in terms of skills, putting on there like what you're actually working with now and what you want to go forward working with. So having absolutely everything on there isn't essential a lot of the time. But you can, for example, so that skills section, just that skills section, I'd be putting in there what you're working on now, what you want to carry on working with, basically, and AI as well. So a lot of software developers I'm speaking to at the moment, 90% of them, if not more, are using AI.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not listing it on their CV, but actually clients want to see that sometimes. Not all clients, but a lot of them are wanting to see AI tools because a lot, at one in particular I'm recruiting for at the moment, software developers, they want to see what they're working with from an AI perspective because they're very pro AI. So, it's just, yeah, those kind of things. So AI tools, what you're working with now, what you want to continue working with. But then lower down in your CV, so each particular position, you can be putting like Python or Java and stuff like that. So they'll still see that you've done it, but it's not your top skills, is how I'd kind of describe it. So in that section, it's top skills.
So it's kind of your strongest recent skills and the things that you want to be working on that are
Yes,
relevant to the job you're applying for.
that's it. Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, cool. The other thing you mentioned then was achievements. I know this is something a lot of software engineers struggle with because they say, well, I worked in a team, we built something, or I don't know how much money that generated, whatever. What's your advice on how they can tackle that and put something concrete and useful and measurable in there?
hmm It is tricky because, especially when you are part of a team, it is really difficult to kind of understand exactly how you impacted it. But if you know as a team, you can kind of say, as a team, we achieved X, and I covered whatever part you covered. So it is tricky though, and I probably don't know the exact answer. I'll be honest for that. Often it's kind of like a person by person basis, and I can kind of advise them based on what they tell me. So it's not like a one size fits all. But generally speaking, I would say you have got to be careful of going, we did this, we did that, we did that, because it's very difficult to actually comprehend what exactly you did as part of that team. So I would just say, we achieved X, but me specifically, I worked on, X, Y, Z. Um, but it is like, again, person by person basis, really. Um, but I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I often advise people that if they have no idea what the impact of the team was, they should be asking because actually an awful lot of product owners or project managers or whoever's running your project and is more client facing than you, whether your client's internal or external, they're often delighted to share that detail. They've quite often just experienced that nobody else is as interested in it. So talk to them, ask them. And this is where you have to be thinking like from when you begin a job. How do I build that network? How do I ask these people these questions? How do I start building up the information I need for my next job? Which kind of feels a bit weird when you just started a new job to be start thinking about your next one, but that next one might be in the same company. You might be going for promotion. So if you've got this list of impact and what you've done and how it's moved the needle on an important objective, that helps with your promotion. It might be another job in the same organization that you're going to apply for and interview for within that organization. So again, I think more people, and some of us call it a brag list, should be building that document of what you've done and talking to people. Build that network of people that you can ask and say, why are we doing this? what difference is it making to the business? Who's it going to help? What key metric will it change?
No, that's brilliant advice, actually. Definitely. I agree. And like you say, product people, project managers, they love talking about it because it's their achievement, it's their project. So
Yeah,
you're part of their project, but the achievement, it's kind of on them to get that. So they'll love speaking about that. So yeah, I love that. Love that advice.
okay, cool. So you talked a lot about clients wanting to see what AI tools developers have been used. Moving slightly to a different aspect of AI, are you seeing people use AI to find a role, whether that's adapting their CV, writing cover letters, job hunting? What are you seeing there?
Yes. So there's a lot of ChatGPT use in CVs. I'm not against it using it. I use it a lot for content. But as I use it for an idea for content and kind of, structure for it. It's fantastic at that, but it does spit out the same stuff. It doesn't matter how you ask it, it'll spit out the same stuff to you as it will to other developers. So I do see CVs quite often that are very, very similar. They're always slightly differently worded, but they're very similar. And I'm like, oh God, they've used ChatGPT. And you can see like the double dash, you can see like commas where there shouldn't really be commas or a dash instead of a comma and stuff like that. And there's a lot of giveaway points. And you know, some people would argue that, it's using your initiative a little bit because you're using it to kind of help and stuff like that. That's what it's there for. But you have got to be real, and your CV is specific to you. So if you're using ChatGPT, that's generalist. It's not just for you. So I think use it, but use it for a base and then edit it, but edit it very, very heavily, and make it your own. But that I'm seeing a lot ChatGPT use for actually building CVs. So some people I've seen and heard that they use it for like tracking applications, which is quite cool.
Interesting.
And I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but obviously I'm speaking to a lot of technical people, so they're building like kind of application tracking systems of sort, basically, if they're on the market for a long time, because it is like a full-time job, unfortunately, sometimes finding a role at the moment. So that's been pretty cool, and I think that's a really good idea. If you've got the time to kind of track your applications so you know exactly where you're at with everything, because it can become a bit overwhelming. You just kind of send your CV and then you're out there and it's like, well, what happens then? But if you know like where it is, and then people will put in like prompts to kind of remind them to kind of follow it up and stuff like that with the people on LinkedIn. And they're the people that are kind of more successful in this job market, actually. So that's been pretty cool. That's been a cool thing I've seen with AI. And I think just general content help, really. So, for example, like if they are following up, like help with emails, stuff like that, which is cool. I'm all about that. But yeah, that's it, really.
How about cover letters? Everybody's favourite topic. So should you do them? Should you not do them? Should they be dead by now? And is AI a tool we can use for that?
They should be dead. Yeah,
I agree.
definitely. Yeah,
Cool.
I just think a cover letter is only needed if your CV's rubbish. So if your CV's strong, why do you need a cover letter? Because you're just repeating what. Yeah, it's just yeah. I don't get it. I don't understand why people are still asking for cover letters. I personally don't ever, and neither do any of my clients. But I suppose in a way, so I do a summary. Now, when I'm sending CVs across to clients, my summary can be like nearly half a page, and I've always had really good feedback on them. So I suppose in a way that is my version of a cover letter, but it's different. So what I put in that is and I use ChatGPT for this, by the way, but I've got quite a decent prompt. So what I do is I type as people talk, you see. So all my notes are exactly what our conversation is. Um, and a lot of the time, people talk to me about projects that they haven't, massively detailed in their CV. So I use it as a bit of a backup to be like, they reference X on their CV, and this is more detail about that. This is what they achieved. This is what happened. This is like how the team structure was and whatnot. It just gives a lot more context to it. But I also put in there obviously stuff that isn't on your CV, like your current salary, package, the expectation, the package, notice period, when they can interview, that kind of thing. But from a candidate perspective, applying, if they ask for a cover letter, I don't know anyone that actually properly reads them, to be honest. But like I say, not many of my clients actually ask for them, so it's really tricky. Like if I ever get one through from a candidate, I don't read it, to be honest. I just go straight to CV because that's what I want to know. But I think you can use it, to be honest. That's my answer, because you can put in more detail that's not necessarily in your CV, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit
Back to that balance between the 1 and 6 page CV, I guess, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it. If your CV's strong, there's no need for a cover letter, is my opinion.
You mentioned something there, and you include their current salary. That's always a contentious issue. A lot of people feeling they shouldn't have to disclose that, and that it's not relevant, and you might have been underpaid in your current role, so they don't want to disclose it. So what's your view on that? How useful is it? Do you expect people to, or do you expect not people to, and it's just something that you include if they disclose it?
I expect people to tell me what they're on. But there's only ever been so far since launching my business, been loads previously, but I'll just concentrate on that. There's been 2 people who have been really reluctant, and it's been because they've been underpaid. So how I explain, I'm always super honest, super open. That's like my whole ethos in my company. So I say to people, like a lot of people don't realise this, but whatever the salary is I get you, I get a percentage of it. So I'd be doing myself a disservice by getting you less salary. So I always go on market value and what I genuinely believe that the people are worth. So I tend to go, right, based on our conversation so far, because I always leave salary till the last, built up a bit of trust and a relationship and whatnot before they disclose that. So I would say at the end, right, if you don't want to give it me, this is what I'm going to tell you that I think you're worth, and then you can tell me what your salary is, and if it is too low, that's fine because I can explain that to the client that you're underpaid and what the market value is, and my clients trust me to do that. So the twice that someone's done that, I've said to them, right, I think you're worth X salary, and they've gone, oh, okay. And then they're like, well, I'm currently on 20 grand less than that. And I'm like, right, you're underpaid then. So let's get that sorted. So yeah, I understand why candidates are a bit nervous about it because they feel, and I'm sure this happens by the way, but not with my clients currently. They feel if they disclose that information, the client's aware of the salary and it's 20 grand less than what they're sending over at, they're going to offer them 10 grand less than what they want. But it's then my job to make sure that doesn't happen and to make sure that the client's educated and is aware of the market value and how much that candidate's worth.
Yeah, and it's always a false economy to try and get people at below market value if you have a genuine need for them and you can afford to pay the market value, because they're now aware of that. They're now, if they take the role, they're going to be constantly 1 foot out the door looking for the next one and looking to improve it. So as a
Totally.
company, you've shot yourself in the foot. You've set the situation up ready for that person to churn out and move on as quickly as they can.
Yeah, I agree. And because the market, and getting ahead of myself now, um, jumping into the question that you've got for the future, but because of the way the market is now, that is likely to get better. I hope, fingers crossed. But it should. We've seen it kind of happen time and time again. It drops and then comes back up slowly and whatever. So when that happens, they're going to just go, aren't they? They're not going to stick around. They're going to go. So yeah, it might be a short term thing, offering them less salary, but like you say, they've always got one foot out the door.
Let's talk about the market then. I think we've kind of hinted that it's not very good at the moment. Are you seeing any signs of recovery? Are you seeing any signs of it improving at all?
Yeah, totally. So there's a lot of negative press in there on the market at the moment. So I don't need to go into like, oh, boo hoo, it's like rubbish, whatever. I'll give you the positive spin. So it's been like this for about a year and a half now, if not longer, probably closer to 2 years. But I'd say the beginning of this year, it was probably the worst I've seen it, but I've only done this for, 9 years, so it's definitely been worse. But personally, it was the worst I've experienced it. But the what was happening is the economy obviously wasn't ideal. People were kind of holding back, and normally what happens in the market, and I don't know if this is factual, by the way, it's mainly my opinion, I suppose, but generally what I see is like the bigger companies in the northwest start hiring, and then the smaller companies are like, right, okay, they're hiring, so we can go now. And what happened is those bigger companies, they're still not, they are hiring more, but they're not hiring at the rate that they were. But the smaller companies now have gone, well, we can't wait forever. We need to get moving at some point. So it is getting better now for sure. And from August, so I had the most roles I've ever had in August. It was crazy, and that's never happened because August is
It's normally
usually
a
a pretty
quiet summer month. Yeah.
yeah. It's everyone's on holiday and everything like that, but it was just crazy. And yeah, I don't want to tempt fate, but touch wood, I should do my biggest ever billing month this month, and place the most amount of people I've ever placed in a month. So granted, I haven't got a team now helping me, but it is getting so much better now. And I'm seeing really, really positive signs that it's going to continue that way. It's not going to be how it was post COVID, where it just went wild. I just don't think that's maybe ever going to happen, or certainly not in the next few years anyway. Um, but it's slowly and gradually we're coming out of that kind of lull, I suppose, from what I can see, which is good.
I think what you described with the bigger companies hiring and then the little companies following probably is true. It's that kind of trickle down economics effect. As the big companies
Mm,
spend money, they buy from the little companies around them quite often, so that pulls the whole area up.
yes, yeah. It's a confidence thing as well, isn't it? Because they look to those businesses to go, okay, they're doing it now. We can go as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, yeah, you're right.
So I think my concern as we start to see the shoots of recovery
Hmm.
is there's a massive amount of money being invested in AI. And if those companies don't become profitable soon, I personally can't see a way for them to become profitable because they have a lot of competition amongst themselves. They need to charge a lot more than they're currently charging, and I don't think enough people are going to pay or keep paying at the level that they need to charge. So they could double their fees, but half their customers, so the revenue will stay the same. So, and the Bank of England pointed this out the other day, not to get too much into economics because we're a software engineering channel, but the Bank of England's actually described AI companies as a systemic risk to the US, in particular, stock markets. I think the top 5 tech companies account for over 30% of the market, which is a scary big thing. And if just one of them falls, that will come crashing down and give us another post.com crash, which could kind of kill off the recovery. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. We'll have to see. And I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but it does feel a bit like the dot-com bubble, and that we might end up back there. So again, I think I agree with you. I'm not going to see that kind of massive growth that we had during the dot-com bubble or post-COVID again, at least not anytime soon. On a more cheerful note, pivoting, people that are looking, how useful is LinkedIn as a job seeker?
Very, very useful. I think it makes you stand out. So it's all about personal brands. So a lot of people talk about that. And like you say, back when, a few years ago, when a software developer was looking for a job, it didn't matter. They put the CV out on the job boards, done. Now, just to give you an idea, I don't personally use job boards myself anymore. I use purely LinkedIn. That's a lot to do with cost, I'll be honest, because obviously I'm a one-man band, solo recruiter. But I have not struggled to fill any of my roles just using LinkedIn. So I get a lot of referrals on there and stuff like that. But just to give, I always give this example where personal branding is super, super important. I was working with this developer on a separate project basically, and I didn't know that he did a specific tech stack, and his friend was telling him you should post on LinkedIn. So anyway, he posted on LinkedIn, and this is a guy that I've been working with for a few weeks now, and I didn't know that he did this specific tech. Um, so anyway, posted on LinkedIn, it come up on my feed, and I was like, why didn't you tell me you did that? I've actually got a job for you. So I ended up placing him on a project, and that's led to multiple projects now with this particular client, purely because of that post. And I'm sure we would have come across, we would have kind of come to it in the end, but we'd never had a conversation about that particular tech stack that he worked on. So yeah, that just gives you an example of where content is so important, because I could be speaking to you, but maybe not about the right topic, and then all of a sudden I see a post and I'm like, oh, get that person. And there's another example as well that I use quite a bit, is had a urgent data analyst position. And again, I'd been speaking to this candidate, and I knew all their tech skills, so that was fine, and they were great for the role. But I speak to candidates all day, every day. It's difficult to remember everybody. So the role come in, I didn't instantly think about this person. So I opened LinkedIn to go on LinkedIn search, and he was at the top of my feed. And I don't even know what he posted, to be honest. I didn't see it, but I was like, oh my God, I need to ring him. And I placed him in that position as well. So yeah, it's super, super important. And it's content, personal branding, just get stuff out there, just post. It doesn't need to be anything over, you don't need to overthink anything. Just post about what you're doing, what you're working on, and get on recruiters, hiring managers' feeds.
So content can be a great way to be top of mind then, and to be
Mhm.
visible. Are you
Yes.
using LinkedIn Recruiter then, or just a normal search?
Yes, I use LinkedIn Recruiter, yeah. Um,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So are you the 2 or 3 top tips you could give somebody on how to make themselves appear well on LinkedIn Recruiter? What are the things that we could do to make sure we're the person that comes up when you're searching, Mary?
Sure. So you can attach a resume to, or they call it resume, so CV to LinkedIn, and what it does, so it doesn't show to your employers, or it doesn't show to anyone else on LinkedIn. It's only people with LinkedIn Recruiter, and you can on the back end, I believe, and I've never done this myself, by the way, but just from what candidates tell me, you can block your specific businesses from seeing you as well. So you can upload your CV, and then what happens is it pulls through your skills off your CV onto your LinkedIn. So sometimes when I go on someone's LinkedIn on Recruiter, they'll just be like loads of skills. And I'm like, where have they all come from? But it took me a minute to figure out that it was like off their CV, that it just picks out like kind of keywords, which is pretty cool. So that's really good, because some people aren't great at updating their LinkedIn. So it just helps from that perspective for keyword searching. And the other thing is obviously having open to work on there. Like I say, you can hide that from varying businesses. So if you don't want people to see it, that's not a problem. But what I do, just to kind of give you a bit of insight into how a recruiter uses LinkedIn generally, is I would put a LinkedIn search in, on the back end of Recruiter. Generally, it's usually keywords. So go back to the keyword side from the resume. But then when I search, it'll come up with thousands of people. So how I narrow that down is put open to work first, and I hit those people first that are open to work, and then move on to people that may not be. But generally, I get the people I need off open to work first. So I tend to stick to that. So that's super, super important. And I'll tell you what else is quite good, and it just saves us a couple of clicks, really, which not, it's not the end of the world, but the can't remember what LinkedIn call it, but basically it's like an opening kind of line just under your
The
um
headline, yeah.
photo, yeah, the headline of kind of what you are. So software developer using AI, or software developer, blah blah blah, like that. Like C sharp, .NET software developer. That's really helpful as well, because sometimes when you're doing a search, software developers come up, and then you'll message them, because the skills have come through. But then they'll go, well, I'm not a Node developer. I'm a .NET developer. And I look on their profile and I'm like, I wouldn't have been able to tell that from the profile. So that's really helpful as well. It just helps us as recruiters make sure we're messaging for the right roles.
Okay, cool. So, firstly, question then about location. What about location? How important is it that you set that? Should it be where you live or where you want to work?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, where you live, because obviously it's travel distance as well. So if it's 3 days in the office, for example, or 2, 3 days in the office, I need to know where you live so I know it's realistic that you can actually get to the client. Um, so yeah, that's a good point, because some people put United Kingdom, and it's really weird. It happens to be literally the other day actually for a software engineer role. And I messaged somebody for a position in Warrington, and they were like, how have I come up in your search? Because I'm like down south. And I was like, so I clicked on their profile and it said United Kingdom. And I was like, how have they? So yeah, I don't know why they were in my search, but obviously I've assumed, oh, well, they must work, must live around Manchester kind of area, but they didn't. So I advised him and he actually updated it. So he was like, oh, thank you for that. I didn't even realise. So yeah, some people put in like United Kingdom, especially if they're looking for a role. Like, we've no idea where you live. You could live anywhere. So yeah, it is really important to put where you live.
I guess the counterpoint of that is, if like me, you live 90 miles outside London, but it's an hour on the train and you were happy to work in London, if you put, West Wing, Wiltshire, where I actually am, people aren't going to find you when they're looking for people in London. So potentially, I think there's maybe two sides to that. Probably matters a bit more if you're in Wallington, say.
Yeah. So I predominantly do the northwest. So for me, like someone put in Chester, and if I've got a role in Manchester, I generally know they probably wouldn't travel that, because it's not like a million miles away, but it takes a long time to get there. Um, so I know the areas quite well, so how far I can kind of go out. But yeah, when you're talking London, like you say, it is different. And I know a lot of people do put London when they're quite far out of London, but they can get into it really, really easily. So yeah, that's a good point, to be fair. So it is quite different to my kind of area.
Yeah, we're talking about that north-south divide again, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, yeah, it's real.
Yeah, it is definitely unfortunate. But again, the tech scene in Manchester and Birmingham, for that matter, they both seem to be growing and picking up.
Yeah, yeah, they are. I've only done a little bit of recruitment in Birmingham, to be honest, but Manchester, um, weirdly, like central Manchester, I don't really have masses of clients. It's more around the outskirts, predominantly like South Manchester. That's like a booming area for tech. Interestingly,
So maybe I could get to move back to Tudor Hume then and find a
yeah,
tech job there.
yeah, totally, totally. Warrington as well, like Daresbury, which is that side of Warrington, that kind of tech park. There's a lot of really good clients on there that I've got, and a lot of businesses that obviously I don't work with as well.
Hopefully you can get some of them soon.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Okay, cool. So I didn't know that LinkedIn allowed you to attach your resume. That's interesting. It must be one of
Mm,
those hidden features that they haven't really advertised and worth people looking
yeah,
at.
and I don't know exactly how it works, to be honest. I need to have a look into it so I can advise people on it. I'll do my homework, find out how that works.
Awesome. And you've mentioned that you started your one-man business, as you put it recently, or one-woman business, should we say. How's that gone? I mean, it's a very difficult market you started in. It's very brave of you. How's it been?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. I'm always open, honest. So, the first 6 months, I wasn't really doing recruitment. I was like building the brand and kind of just getting my head around exactly what I want to achieve. So it has taken me in a weird direction that I've never been in before. So, I've always done contract and permanent recruitment, predominantly perm. So I'd be like 90% perm, 10% contract. And that was just how I just assumed that I would carry on. But obviously, the market is dictated otherwise. So I found that I'm doing quite a lot of project work. So that's very new for me, something I've never done before, and that involves freelancers. So they could be contractors, but they could have a contract, but then also want something on the side. So they're essentially a cheaper resource for clients because they've got multiple projects, and the clients are totally fine with that as well. They can work flexibly, whatever hours they want, that kind of thing. And it's done on a project basis. So when it comes to pricing, I work closely with them to kind of scope out the work and price that in terms of like how many days it's going to be, what, yeah, and try and guess, how long this project would take, but educated guess. And I've got a lot of those at the moment. So I think I've got about eight projects running at the minute. And the biggest one is a project like well over 100K. So it's a decent, project. And essentially, I'm kind of like a mini project manager, but not as talented.
I
Not.
think that's great to hear that your business is growing and that you've been adapting and following that. But I think it's also great as somebody that's been involved in the contracting market for a lot of the nearly 30 years I've been in tech. It's great to hear that people are starting to actually use it the way it should be, where contractors are genuine businesses working on projects.
Hmm.
Maybe that's a positive thing to come out of all the mess that IR35 has been in, that if companies are starting to recognise of how to use contractors, creating projects, creating statements of work and offering them out that way, that sounds really positive. So what are
Totally.
the most in-demand skills you're seeing for those?
So it's all software development, but actually 4 of the projects is AI related, not heavily, so they're not AI engineers, they're software developers, but they're implementing, for example, AI software that's already on the market. They're just kind of integrating that into the product. So they're not making their own AI tools. They're using what's on the market basically. But they're like that's coming in quite a lot, and I'm getting a lot more. So, for example, we're pricing up quite a few that are similar to that at the minute. Um, and you touched there about like contractors and stuff like that. I think that so contractors are expensive resource, but actually they when you work it out, they can often be cheaper than full-time employees, and I think that companies starting to see that, especially smaller businesses. And when I'm on calls with them and they're talking about salaries, and I'm like, "You're never going to do that." But have you thought about this? Like, what about a freelancer? And they're like, "What will they do that work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally." And in a lot less time as well. It's probably worth mentioning as well that the change in employment law that's due to come in April of next year, and I feel that is going to hugely impact the job market as well, or potentially, because I think people are going to be a lot more nervous hiring. The change is basically that, for anyone that doesn't know, that um, when you're employed, you get rights straight away. So rather than waiting 2 years, you just can't get sacked basically straight off. You have to go through all the HR processes and do it properly. And I feel that's going to make especially smaller businesses very, very anxious to employ people. They're either going to be super, super picky, which is going to make recruiters' jobs and obviously people looking for roles a lot more difficult, or they're going to go more towards like freelance contract kind of hires.
Yeah, that's where, when I first was contracted,
Mm.
I started one contract after a 20-minute phone call. I had the 20-minute phone call on Thursday. They said, yeah, you sound competent. You can do the job. Contract sorted out and faxed over, show my age now, on Friday. Started Monday morning. But
Yeah,
I think for that one, there was a 2-week trial period where basically they could just say on the day, nope, not a good fit. And in many ways, that was better because you hire a contract resource or contract person because they have that skill set. So you either come in on that Monday and Tuesday and you hit the ground running, or you weren't the right person. And you're never going to find that out as well in an interview as get the person in, get them doing the job. And I always quite enjoyed that. I enjoyed going into a new environment and having to get up to speed and start adding value quite quickly. Coming back to something you said earlier about the cost of contractors versus full-time employees, I think what a lot of people forget, and perhaps, again, as software engineers don't get exposed to this, is that the cost of a full-time employee is not their salary.
Mm-hmm.
It's their salary, and in the UK it's plus national insurance, in the US it's plus healthcare, it's plus all the other benefits you get them, pension, 401k in the US, and all of that. And for most companies I work for, we've worked out that the actual cost of a full-time employee is between 1.5 and 2 times the salary.
Yes.
So when you look at that, an employee on 50k actually costs the company closer to 100k. When you then look at contractor rates, it starts to make sense that you are actually saving money on what appears like a quite high contract rate, because you say you don't have that employment rights to worry about. You only have to take one for the project. You've not got an ongoing liability. You're not responsible for the pension, the private health, or whatever other benefits you offer.
Mm-hmm.
When you start factoring in all that, they look very, very similar.
Yeah, I agree. And then project basis. So when, contractors have multiple projects, their rates are usually lower for a start. And then, there is a bit more upfront where they're doing a statement of work. But other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. But it's even more kind of value to the client because they have a set timeline that if it ran over, the contractor it's kind of on them that they should have scoped it better. So it with a day rate contractor, obviously if it runs over, they have to extend it for 3 months or whatever. So you've minimised that risk as well. So yeah, I found that's been really good recently.
Cool. That's really great to hear that more and more people are looking at using contractors the right way as genuine businesses,
Yeah.
providing a business-to-business service and making IR35 irrelevant.
Yes.
Awesome. We've come to the end of our time, Mary. So any last bits of wisdom you'd like to share with anyone listening about how they can find a job?
I think just reiterating what I've said really. So don't use a one-page CV. Use what's there as well. So reach out to me if you need help. I do CVs, a CV reviewing service. There's other people that do that too. But make sure you're using the right people. And yeah, LinkedIn profile is huge in this current market, so use it.
Awesome. How's best for somebody to reach out to you then? Via LinkedIn, via your website, something else?
Yes, LinkedIn is absolutely spot on, please. Or they can email, but my email and everything's on there as well.
Okay, and we'll put your LinkedIn details in the show notes for anyone to get in contact. Thank you very much, Mary. Been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Coding Chats. If you did, please like and subscribe. And feel free to check out these other videos on a similar topic.